Hello friends, welcome to today's lesson on syntax and functions of classes in Python. Today we're going to be discussing object-oriented programming. Now I want to quickly explain the use of object-oriented programming, which is, let's say, an intermediate to advanced level of coding. It's very useful for large batches of complicated code and storage. Essentially, anytime you work with a database, you should in fact have some kind of class system. So today I'm just going to run through a concept, right, called object-oriented programming. Now what this is a blueprint for anything that you see in the real world that will be remodeled into code. Now this includes things like cats, dogs, cars, ships, data structures, variables, anything in a video game, anything in a bank system, anything in a website or a Android application, Flutter device, anything. Object-oriented programming is essentially one of the best structures you could work with to expand your knowledge and your expertise in IT. So without further ado, let's get started with a good example. The first example is ships, right? What's wrong with just declaring 4 variables like this, talking about a pirate ship, right? Let's say not just any pirate ship, but the Black Pearl, right? Now let's say the Black Pearl is, I don't know, 120 meters long. What cargo does it have? Let's say 102 wine barrels. It has 20 soldiers. It has 1 captain, and it has 50 crew members, and it has a volume of 100. Now all of these variables would be saved under pirate ship. Now the only problem is, let's say I have another ship called cargo ship. I have to manually change not only the values of this, but the storage devices as well. Or what would happen is it would override this one here, which is not what we want to do. We do not want to override the initial variables. So in this case we need to make a class, especially since we have another boat, which is another object of this. So what we're going to do right now is just discuss why this system is bad and why there is in fact a better system. So a good video game to take a reference from is Call of Duty 2 or Call of Duty 1. Now at some point in this video game series you fight the Germans. Why is this important? Because at some point you are fighting an offline computer, and there's not just one German that you kill and then you win the game. You fight 10, 20, 30, hundreds of them. And imagine if you had to program all 100 Germans yourself using variables like this. That would be extremely inefficient, especially since this is only the storage for them. You'd then have to make methods specific for all of them, and then work with different variables, and it's just a mess of code. So we would not be doing things this way. instead we'd learn how to make an actual character using this syntax here. So I'm just going to delete this again and retype it for you. The way you start off with classes is you just type in class followed by a class name with uppercase and a colon like you would a function or a condition. Have an indentation, and then you can do your constructor. A constructor is essentially when the German guy spawns into the world, right? Or when the guy's born, when someone's born, right? That's what a constructor is. The default properties when something is created at first. So the name of this method is always going to be called initialize, or init for short, right? So the way that we pass variables here is through something called parameters. We pass it in parameter brackets, which is just round brackets, followed up by a colon, right? So now let's say we have a German soldier called Dolph. Now Dolph has blonde hair, hazel eyes, an AK-47, he's 6 foot tall, and we need to create this character for the video game. This is our job as the video game developer of Call of Duty 2. So how do we pass in all of these variables and values? Simply copy paste them right in here. Now keep in mind all of these variables have to coincide with code, so this has to be string, all of them actually. String, right? Right, so just for a second pretend that there's no errors here and that we can actually see these variables here. Now the first thing we're going to work with is hair, then we're going to work with hazel eyes, AK-47 and 6 foot. So we need some sort of placeholder to keep all of these things. As long as we have a life, right, which is called German, as long as we have a life of this object, this is when it was born and it's going to die at some point. That's how you have to think of it. So Dolph is going to be born in this function. You'll be able to do things like talk, right, or something like walk. Now in every function we do, we always pass in this variable called self. Every single time we declare a function, we have to pass in self. Self means which current person are we working with, right? Now say there's another German called Anne. Anne has black hair, she's 4 foot, she has a book and black eyes. Now Anne on the other hand would be a different object of this class. Now you're wondering, right, why everything is currently red, why we have errors. So all of these values here, blonde hair, blah 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 blah, they need placeholders. Now can we just copy some variables like this and call it a day? No, we can't, because we need to make sure that we can access these variables inside of the other functions here. So the way we reference them now is by saying self dot here, and then we pass in a parameter called here. Now I can say here by default is this. Now you can see one of the errors disappeared, because now this is a default value, and now we have a variable. So in case we want to change the hair from blonde to black, we can now change the hair color. Next variable, self.eyes. Exact same method, right? I want you to try for the last two ones. Okay, so the way to do the last two ones is by saying self dot weapons and then lastly the height would be saved into this thing here. So now we can have an object born out of this class. Keep in mind, when this program runs, nothing will happen, because we didn't expect anything to happen, right? So what I'm going to do now is make a person called Dolph, a variable or object of this class, right? It's called an instantiation or instance of a class. So the way you work with this is by just saying German, and then hair color is whatever. In this case we already have default values, so we don't need to change anything. And then we can reference one of their methods by saying dolph.talk, right, dolph.walk. Let's see if this does anything. If we actually make this do and say something. Okay, so currently we are logging out two messages. Now the only reason this works is because we have object, and then we reference one of the functions, right, of said object called walk or talk, right? Now why did we make all these variables here? A very common way to see if those variables are actually working or not is to make a toString method. We once again pass in self. Self is little variable, right, which essentially refers to this thing storage device. And if you have a constructor, it takes in whatever is here, and it passes all of these default parameters into this thing. So whenever you work with it again, you just call self. And now we can make a lovely print statement. Let's say I have self dot hair color. My height is self dot height, and I have self dot eyes. Let me showcase my weapons. And then I'm going to print out the first weapon that I have. In this case I can just print out the ray, it's fine. And let's see if this runs smoothly. No, because you didn't reference this. Eye color. I have blonde hair. My height is 6 foot. And I have hazel eyes. Let me showcase my weapons. AK-47. So now we made one person, one German. Now, if you make one thing, you can make many easily. So now we want to make the second person and, right? We want to pass in black hair. Now notice this will actually give you the parameters that you declare above. So it will actually guide you through every single thing that you need to give in. So the first thing is Chris called the hair color, right? Next up is eye color, so black. Next up is weapons, which is just grenade, no, book, and the height 4 foot. You don't need to say height or weapons though, just pass in like this, and then you say toString, and let's see what happens. I have black hair color, my height is 4 foot. Let me showcase my weapons book. Okay, let's see. Is anything different about this? Yeah, so this is an array. Don't make arrays inside of arrays. Okay, so now we have working English, and we have as many humans or Germans as we want. Now lastly, today I'm just going to show you how to make as many of them as you want inside of a loop, because that's essentially how Call of Duty works. So you make a little loop, but before you make a loop you need to know how much Germans you want to make. Let's say 100 of them, 200. Alright, now let's call our loop for I in range. call your max there. Now all we have to do is just make a new soldier, new German soldier, and then say German. Yeah. Now we want to pass in, let's say, the exact same parameters as and for now, right? And then we add it to an array called soldiers, which by default is empty. So I'm going to say soldiers dot push, sorry, dot append, right? So now we make a new soldier and we add them to a list of them. And after we're done in this loop, we just want to log out soldiers, see what happens. Okay, so for now I'm going to turn the two strings off. And let's see. Okay, we definitely got something here. We got a long list of objects. Now what we actually want to do is test all of these soldiers to strings, right? Just to show you that we actually save it into this array, I'm going to make yet another loop. I'm gonna call it toString method, right? Let's see what this does. Okay, so it's just going to print out a whole lot of the same thing. So now we essentially have 200 different copies of the exact same German, and they all look like Annie Frank. The only problem is we don't want them to all look like the same person. So in this case we're going to make some arrays, right, for acceptable values. So I'm going to say iColors, right? I'm going to pass in some things like red. Wait, we don't have red. Blue, right? Green, hazel, black, and brown, most common. Right, now I want to call a random number in iColors, right? So instead of saying black here, because we pass that in as a second parameter, I'm going to say a random iColor. So now I'm just going to loop through this array and just see a random eye color, give it to them, right? So now I can put it right there. Let's see if this does anything. Yeah, so now you can see that all of the soldiers now would randomly have different colored eyes, and that's the only thing that's different about them. So now what I can also do is say weapons, and I can do the exact same thing. Yeah, instead of saying book, I can say weapons, random, same thing with this one here actually. Instead of saying eye color, I'll say something like, actually I don't need to, since this is also referencing hair color. I'll just say colors, you know. And convention says lowercase. Okay, let's run this, and now we'll have random soldiers. Let's see. So now I have hazel colored hair. My height is 5 foot. I have hazel eyes. Let me showcase my weapons. Right, change this to random 2. Now I'll see that I have blue colored hair. My height is 8 foot, and I have black eyes. Let me showcase my weapons. AK-47. Next one, green hair, 9 foot, brown eyes, Molotov. This is essentially how they make thousands of zombies or any kind of video game monster in anything. This is essentially object-oriented programming in a nutshell. Thank you for watching.